Hi, I'm Larry Gopper, and I'm known by some as the Word Chipper. And my friend Tom Martin has written a book. It's a book about who and what God is. The book is called Love and Spirit, A New Set of Eyes, and it's available in both hardcover and electronic editions. Now, Tom Martin is a captain for a major airline. He's never been to a seminary, and he holds no degrees in theology that would qualify him as an expert on God. However, Tom calls himself a seeker, like many of you and certainly like me. Tom and I got together today to talk about his book. We're in a comfortable cabin here on the shores of beautiful Lake Vermilion in northern Minnesota, not far from where Tom lives. I want to start our conversation, Tom, by asking you, what's your book all about?
My book is about looking at God kind of in a different way than we typically think of him, I think. When we picture God, we kind of tend to picture him in earthly terms. You know, we're so familiar with flesh and blood and the physical realm of things, and we kind of tend to picture God in those same terms, and in heaven as well, as, you know, places and times and beings. And when I read the New Testament, it didn't really seem to fit with what Christ was telling us about God and what he was telling us about heaven. You know, he's talking about heaven being a place that is within us. You know, I'm like, how can a place that's infinitely huge to accommodate God and all of these souls that are returning to God, how can this be in us? You know, that just didn't make any sense to me. And he himself describes God as being a spirit, and John, his disciple, describes God as being love. And so the title of the book is Love and Spirit, A New Set of Eyes. And I started looking at God through those two ideas, just thinking about God in terms of a spirit and God in terms of love. And when I started looking at God in those terms, all of the Bible just started coming together for me. The typical questions like, who is God? Well, God is love. You know, what is heaven? Heaven is being embedded in the love that is God. What is God's law? God is love one another. What fulfills God's law? Love fills for God's law. What did the prophets all speak to? They spoke to love. What binds us to God? It's love. What binds me to you? It's love. What was our great beginning? Love. What's our great ending? Love. That word just keeps coming up over and over and over again, and it just meshes, it just fits together so perfectly. I'm like, this has got to be the answer.
Tom, your airline career is so different from writing books. What moved you to tackle this project?
This book is not something I ever really dreamed of doing. You know, I didn't, as a little kid, grow up to be, you know, thinking, God, I wish I could write a book someday. I always wanted to fly airplanes, and that was my dream, and, you know, and I was lucky enough to accomplish that. My mom's really the writer in the family here. Ever since I was a little kid, my mom kind of instilled this awe for God's creation. You know, I can remember sitting on her lap as a little kid, you know, and watching rainstorms blow through and just appreciating the awe and the wonder of it all. Having that instilled at such a young age, I've always kind of questioned, what is this all about? Where did this all come from? Who is God? What is this, you know, how does this all work?
What do you want the reader to get from your book? What's the takeaway?
I think what I'm hoping for is to help them kind of shift gears from thinking in terms of earthly terms, physical bodies and physical places, and seeing it more in spiritual terms, you know, as God being as some type of a spiritual energy. You know, I don't know how else to describe spirit other than energy. Something that dwells within all of us, you know, because I truly believe God is within you, he's within me. You know, and this is one of the things that the church doesn't agree with, but I see God everywhere. I see God in his creation. You know, I see him in the sun and the stars, the moon, the trees, the call of a loon. I mean, it's just, all of it is just so beautiful. It's such a masterpiece. The way I describe it, it's like if you were to wake up one day and walk into your kitchen for breakfast, and there sat the most beautiful masterpiece painting sitting in the middle of the kitchen, the questions that would be going through your mind would be like, who painted this? And it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Where did this come from? Why is it here? Who put this here? All of these questions. And to me, it's the same thing with God and creation. It's like, who put this here? Who made this? And what's this all about? And so, when I started reading, like I was talking earlier about Christ saying that the kingdom of heaven is within us, then it's just like if you start picturing God as being a spirit, then that makes sense. Then I can understand how spiritual energy is within me and within you. But if it's a physical flesh and blood, I mean, it just doesn't translate. You can't. I just can't picture bodies being inside of bodies. But if it's a spiritual energy, then that starts to make sense, how that can be. It's kind of funny is I just had this small group at church that I was a part of, and I was bouncing these ideas off the small group, just see how they would react to it. And my whole point of my ideas obviously is that God is spirit, and the only thing that I had was to kind of visualize that was that old Barbra Streisand Christmas album where she's kind of holding that ball of light. And I had a picture of that and a picture of the typical picture that you have of Jesus Christ with the beard and the robe and all this kind of stuff. And I said, when we think of Christ, we typically think of him being pictured like this. But I said, the real Christ is this spirit, this ball of light. He was spirit first, and he became this, for the briefest of time, 33 years measured against eternity. And now he's back to being spirit again. And I said, this older guy that was in my group, I think he was like 80 years old, a great guy. And he goes, Tom, if I saw the guy with the beard walking towards me in my deer stand, I wouldn't have a problem with that. I could strike up a conversation with that guy, and really relate to this guy, and it would be an awesome conversation to question God. But he goes, if I saw that ball of light coming down the deer trail, he goes, I'd scurry out of my deer stand and run the other way. He goes, I'd be scared to death of this thing. And he goes, how do we relate to this? How do we begin to understand what this is? And I said, that's a great question. And I said, we're not given anything in this world really to understand spirit. I mean, what is spirit? We always talk about it, but nobody really knows what it is. And so, to me, there's like three main topics. There's God, there's love, and there's spirit. And, it's that typical of A equals B and B equals C and then A equals C, that out of that old algorithm. And it was like God was the common denominator. If spirit is God and God is love, then spirit is love. And I'm like, well, can you really do that? Is there some place in the Bible that allows you to make these kind of connections? And it hit me when I was reading in 1 Corinthians. Paul is talking to the Corinthians. He's describing what love is. It's the famous verse that you hear at just about all the weddings. That love is patient, love is kind, love doesn't boast, love is always perseveres, love never quits, it never fails. And something just jumped out at me when I was reading that. I'm like, you know what? I said, he's not describing a simple love. We typically picture love as being an emotion. There's this emotion that we feel. And I'm reading this and I'm like, that just doesn't sound like an emotion that he's describing here. It sounds like he's describing God to me. And if I pull out love and I insert God in there, the verse reads exactly the same thing. God is patient. God is kind. God is not boastful. God never gives up. God never, he always wins, And I'm like, so to me, and then later on you read in the book of John where John actually says God is love several times. And so all of a sudden love just changed for me. It was no longer just an emotion to me. It was God. And so if God is love and God is spirit as well, then spirit is love too. They're all interchangeable ways of describing the same entity, the same thing. And so you've got God, you've got spirit, and you've got love. And it's like we don't really understand what God is. We don't really understand what spirit is, but we know what love is. That we do get to experience in this world. And it became like a Rosetta Stone for me. they didn't know what the ancient Greek, or I mean, what the hieroglyphs were, and there's one other language, I forget what it is, but they understood what the Greek was. And by understanding the Greek, they could decipher the other two. And it's kind of a long-winded story back to this guy in the deer hunting stand. Love is like the thing, that's like the ancient Greek on the Rosetta Stone. That's the thing that in this world that we can experience, that we can come to know and understand. And when we do that, we're basically discovering who God is and what spirit is, because they're all the same thing. So that was kind of like, this guy in the deer stand is like, if this ball of light came at me, I'd be scared to death of it. How do I relate to that? How do I understand what this is? And I'm like, Ray, you're already learning this and you don't even know it. I said, the more you understand what love is, the more you understand what that ball of light is, because it's the same thing.
I heard you mention earlier that you're a member of a church. How has this worked with your developing a new interpretation of who and what God is?
As a kid, I went to church kicking and screaming. My mom and dad dragged me every Sunday, and I didn't really want to, typical how kids are. We got better things to do on Sunday mornings than go to church. And I was confirmed as a Lutheran, and got into college years and all that kind of stuff, and how you kind of just naturally drift away, I think, from the church at that point in time, and then your career starts and your family starts and all this kind of stuff, and I drifted away from the church for like 25 years, and would just kind of go on Christmas and Easter kind of stuff like that, and and a few times that I would go back, I would hear all of this fire and brimstone, and you're going to hell, and this guy, he can't have communion in our church because he believes differently than we do, and I'm just like, what's any of this got to do with God? And I was so repulsed by it for many years, and we moved to Duluth here, and found this church. It was just phenomenal. I mean, the guy that our pastor is my age, and we just connected, and it's just it's beautiful. I mean, he just operates his church service like none I've ever seen before. What I really have come to realize is that church can only bring you so far. It's like your parents. Your parents can only bring you so far, and then you've got to kind of start doing the work yourself. But what church has given me now is opportunities. It's connected me to a bigger whole, which is really the overall answer anyways. All of us are plugging into this bigger whole. That's what God is. To me, that's what heaven is plugging into this whole. And by going to church, I've met so many people that have given me so many different opportunities to do different things. I've met kids that need help. I helped out teaching kindergarten this last semester here. There's another opportunity that I never would have come up without being in this church. And it was interesting. My editor was a pastor as well, and I kind of at the end of it, I said, "So what'd you think? Is this stuff way out there?" And she goes, "A lot of the stuff that you bring up kind of clashes with my theology, but a lot of the stuff you brought up made me go, I never thought of it that way before." And you provide enough simple analogies that kind of, help me to see what you were saying. And while I'm not sure I'm a believer of what you're saying yet, I kind of see what the point that you're making.
Thank you, Tom. Remember, the book is called Love and Spirit, A New Set of Eyes. It's available through Amazon.com or through your favorite local bookstore. I highly recommend it. And thank you for watching.